So we turn the clock back a quarter of the century.
It's
The year
1999.
is 1999. Y2K was looming. It was an uncertain time. Bill Clinton was president of the United States and undergoing trial. A gallon of milk costs $2.84 and a gallon of gas costs 94 cents. It was a grand time. In sports, the Broncos won the Super Bowl. The Yankees won the World Series. The Spurs won the NBA Finals. It was Duncan's first of 5 championships. Tiger Woods won his first PGA championship, and Tony Hawk landed the first ever 900.
What a time.
Pokemon came to the U.S. The card game became a phenomenon.
Never to go away.
Napster changed the music industry with downloadable music. Woodstock returned on its 30th anniversary.
Infamously.
Kind of a disaster.
Yep.
The Backstreet Boys had the top-selling album. It was a big year for the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse as grown teens. NSYNC, Britney, Christina, Ricky Martin. They took over the charts. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was the top TV show of the year.
So your goal on the start of this is just to make me feel as old as possible.
No, although that does have an effect.
It does.
For sure. It was to set the stage for people to remember what life was like.
It was. I would like to add, too, that a young Andy Appleby got his first girlfriend in 1999 and is married to her to this day.
I was going to say, who was I in 1999? I was a 14-year-old turning 15 in November that year. I was an 8th grader who then went into high school for the first time. I was a young, angsty punk.
Did you have long hair?
And I couldn't have really long hair because my school's hair
it wasn't
rules,
allowed.
But I would always, when I would go to the barber, the rules were it had to be over the eyebrows, off the ears, and off the collar. And so it went all the way to the collar, the ears, and the eyebrows as much as it could. And I would try to have it flipping so it could be longer and not be obvious.
Gotcha. So you were a rebel.
In my mind,
I
was a cool rebel. In reality, I was a very scared, rule-following, probably pretty good kid from the outside, just angsty on the inside.
Teacher's kid, coach's kid.
Yes, I was those things.
Yeah.
So apart from the obviously big thing of getting your first girlfriend who you're married to this day, was there any other big things going on in the life of Andy Appleby?
Honestly, there wasn't. I mean, I was always a pretty uneventful kid. I graduated high school in '98. I was going to college, but I really wasn't into it. I kind of look back and movies, they just carried me through a lot of just awkward teenage years and stuff. I was just a real frequent moviegoer. And that's just really about it. There's just not a whole lot of highlights.
Well, I will say if there's, for any year being a frequent moviegoer, 99 was a good year.
It was a good year.
And that's why we're going to do what we're doing on the podcast today and as a series throughout this year.
Yeah.
We're revisiting the year of movies in 1999, 2 movies at a time, one pick from each of us, because this is their 25th anniversary. Now, we didn't get quite so nerdy as to pick 25 years from the day they were released. We just said if they were released
whole year
in the calendar year, it's the 25th anniversary year of it. So these 2 movies are movies that came out in the calendar year of 1999. And we'll go one at a time. We'll start our conversation with your first pick.
Sure.
And would you like to maybe lay the groundwork for this movie?
Yeah, I think so. The movie I picked was the Blair Witch Project. And I think it is vitally important if you're going to talk about the Blair Witch Project to kind of set the table and talk about what it was like in 1999. So if you want me to just run with that, I will. So there's a few big things going on. Number one, this was a movie that came out of nowhere. I was full-blown movie nerd in 1999. I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly, the magazine. Literally just a weekly magazine that talked about movies and TV and pulp culture, but mostly movies and TV. So I was very in tune with what was coming out, what was going on. I knew my stuff back then. I was a huge Oscars guy back then. I could spout off Oscar winners, from 1970 on. I was just full-blown movie nerd. And I didn't know about this movie. It really came from underground and just came out of nowhere. So that's important. Um, so then you start hearing these rumblings about it, and this is going to be so hard. If you weren't there, I think it's going to be really hard to understand all this. How it's this perfect convergence of the internet, which was a thing, but it was a new thing. And so you got that, and this movie, which I'll get to in a second, uses the internet as part of its marketing. And nobody, not just me, nobody had ever seen anything like that before, which sounds ridiculous to say now, but it was that was a thing that was happening. You're like, whoa, like there's like a website about this movie, found footage. Okay. Found footage is everywhere now. You go to Amazon Prime or Netflix, Amazon Prime, I know specifically, I think has its own subcategory. Like you can go to the categories. There's its own subcategory of found footage horror. They're everywhere. This was not the case in 1999. To try and, I mean, you, like I said, unless you were there, you really can't understand what a fresh idea this was. There had been some found footage. Kind of famously in the, I think 80, 81, something like that. It was a movie called Cannibal Holocaust, which was a kind of infamous, it was like, it was banned, and it was a found footage, and people thought it was real. It was a very controversial movie. But, to someone 19 years old, even as a movie nerd, that movie just didn't mean a lot to me. So the found footage thing was really fresh and original. And then it combined these two things, the emergence of the internet and the found footage. People, I don't know if you remember this or not, maybe not because you were younger. People literally thought this was real.
No, I definitely remember that.
Yeah. Like, it was a thing. And it wasn't just like now, because social media is everywhere, where like people, like sometimes you joke around, like you see like older people like on Facebook, they'll repost something and it's like, oh, they think this is real. But like people, the public at large, for a minute there, thought this was real. Like there was like missing part of the marketing was like they created missing posters for these characters. So it was just, you had this like feeling about this movie. Like this movie had like an edginess to it almost. Like even though you quickly realize, or you stop and think about it, saying, okay, this is not real. But it was passed off like it was real. Nobody was winking at the audience. So before this movie even came out, there's this buzz where you're like, no, it's like, I remember trying to explain it to people, like, no, it's like through the camera. Like they filmed it because it wasn't something that was done all the time. And people would be like, wait, what? Like trying to explain this to people. So all these things converge. And then I remember once it started screening, I think they screened it like on like 10 theaters or something like that. And you get this buzz where you're like, this movie is terrifying. So it's just this perfect storm. And I also think you have to factor in where horror was in 1999. You're coming off of the late 80s, where you got these endless and terrible Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th sequels. That's what you were getting in the 80s, where they weren't even really trying to be scary anymore. They were just throwing out the IP, Jason, Freddy, and Michael. And they weren't going for scary. They were going for gory and, the things that horror was going for in the 80s. And then in the 90s, the early 90s, horror is in a real bad place. And a lot of people are even saying horror is dead. Then Scream comes out and kind of revives it. But Scream is very, very wink at the audience. And I love Scream. This is not a criticism of Scream. Very wink at the audience. We're all in on this almost kind of joke, and they're referencing other horror movies. It had been a really long time. It felt like to me, since a horror movie came out that took itself seriously as a horror movie, is what I'm trying to say. So there's kind of the table setter. All these different factors that were so fresh and original at the time, all merging together. And then this movie comes out and it becomes a phenomenon. It becomes you have to go see this movie. Like I remember at the time, like just talking to my friends, or like at the time I worked in a grocery store, and just talking to the other work, and it was like, have you heard about this movie? It was a real conversation starter. And the internet was there, but we weren't even close to social media. So you weren't getting that kind of buzz. You were getting like you had to go out see this movie, and then seek out other people that had seen this movie, and you wanted to talk about it. So, is that an appropriate table setter? Do you feel like that covers it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100%. You're right. I remember the whole discussion of, is this real or not? Because the marketing was, hey, we just found this
But these tapes
footage
were,
of these missing people, and this is what we found. And of course, you're right. Like when you stop and really think about it, you're like, if this is real, they're not putting out in movie theaters as entertainment. Like this is in court cases.
but I'm telling you, you got caught up in the moment.
But you would. And I think the fact that they committed to that bit by recording it very cheaply and didn't look like what other movies look like. People were like, well, it must be. You wouldn't make a movie like this. This is what home videos look like. And I even read in the trivia that it actually looked a little too nice in the original filming, and they actually used effects to make it look a little worse, to make it look more like, it should for being a home movie. So it definitely had that effect. And even things like, of course, the actors being relative unknowns or just unknowns at the
complete
time.
unknowns.
So like the fact that
you can be like, no, I saw her in this other movie.
But they actually they had the cast lay low after making it till it was released. They used the cast's actual names in the movie just to make it again more real. Just all these things contributed to it's maybe one of the most just brilliantly marketed movies of all time.
And they never broke character. They were completely committed to that marketing, and everybody stuck to it. Never did anyone kind of peek around the curtain and be like, wink, it's okay. Like they were so committed to that marketing and to that, adding to that perception of like, this is real. And even when this isn't real died down, the kind of the buzz or the aura around that movie didn't die down.
Right. Yeah. Because once, the idea that it was real got people into the theater, and then once people got in the theater and were scared by it, then it was just, okay, it's a really scary movie. So they just needed to get people there with, is it real or is it not? And then what carried it was people going, you need to see this because it freaked me out.
Yeah. And like I said, you just it's hard to put into words what it was like at the time. Now that found footage has become, they've done every possible gimmick within the found footage, and mostly to not very much success, I don't think. I mean, there's a few good ones or creepy ones, but it became just a cheap way to turn out a horror movie. And you go on any of these, like on the apps we have on our TV, there's terrible, awfully cheap made found footage movies, but this just was not the case in 1999. I can still remember sitting in that theater, and even just when the movie started, before any of the scary stuff happens, it gave you that, it's like, I'm watching something that I shouldn't be watching. It truly captured that, like, I am invading on somebody else's lives. So it's just hard to explain what it was like, but it was a thing. It was a phenomenon, and it, for a moment in time there, it was all anybody was talking about in movie circles.
For sure. So before we get into the actual movie, let's just run through some of the basic IMDb stuff about the movie. So the movie released July 30th of 1999. I thought that was interesting looking back on, because I couldn't remember exactly when in the year, and it's interesting that it was a summer movie.
I know, like, hold off till Halloween, guys. But hey, who am I to criticize? Because their strategy worked.
It was directed by two guys, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. Both of them seemed to get a lot of cred after this movie, but neither one really went on to anything of real significance. Daniel Myrick, going through his IMDb, it's almost nothing.
I know.
Eduardo Sanchez is like a bunch of just episodes of TV.
They tried a couple other they did a Bigfoot found footage movie. One of them did, and they just couldn't recapture that, unfortunately.
Right. The movie was written, the writing credits go to the two guys who directed it, and Heather Donahue, who's the star of the movie. So it's starring Heather Donahue, Michael C. Williams, and Joshua Leonard. Again, unknowns. Read in the trivia, they were looking for people who were good at improv. So they would give them the scenario in the auditions. And if they were taking too long to like think of an answer or something, they'd be like, "Sorry, not for us." They originally were actually planning on doing three males as the lead. but they liked Heather Donahue's audition so much they decided to make her sort of the central character of the movie. And again, of those three, none of the three really went on to much success later. Joshua Leonard has probably worked the most, but again, mostly like kind of showing up in TV shows. Heather Donahue dropped out of acting completely after a few years.
It's a really sad story. She got a lot of backlash for her performance in this movie, and I think from what she was just like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with people criticizing me, and just stepped away. So it's unfortunate.
Which is surprising to me, because one of the things I'll talk about is how I think actually all three did great jobs in the movie, and I think she did in particular a really good job.
Agreed. We'll get to that.
The tomato meter has an 86% on the critic score, which is higher than I expected, because again, critics, they don't usually like horror movies.
I know. Roger Ebert, 4 stars.
Yeah, how about that?
I know.
So 86 on the critics, 57 on audience score. I think largely the criticisms were
the shaky cam.
The shaky cam. There was people who reported they got sick watching the movie.
Because once again, you'd never seen anything like this in a theater. People just weren't ready for it in some ways.
Yeah, and then also, again, if you knew kind of what you're getting into, I think it was well marketed. People should have known, but I think some people go to the theaters and they're just like, "What is this? It's poor quality. Nothing's happening." Type deal, and it's like,
I want to see someone get their head chopped off.
It didn't fit the traditional mold of horror movies like you're talking about
in any way, shape, or form.
So whereas for the most part, I think audiences were going, "How fresh and new," and then a lot of people were just going like, "I don't get it. Where's the
bad guy?"
Yeah. It is an hour and 21 minutes. It is a brisk movie.
Brisk, yes.
I did read that the original cut that they put together was 2.5 hours, and I thought they did a really smart thing cutting that in nearly half.
Less is more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine what another hour and plus of footage would have.
No, you don't need another hour of them arguing in the woods.
Yeah. So let's talk about just the movie, how it actually plays out now.
Can I just add one thing real fast? Absolutely. I did read the final cost when it was all said and done. It's a large. It said I found anywhere between $200,000 and $750,000, and the movie made $248 million just in the theaters.
Yes. Yeah. I was gonna get to some of that budget stuff later, just because.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine.
Yeah.
I skipped over it just because it's part of the most fascinating thing about the movie.
I mean, that movie just literally printed money.
It did.
Yeah.
Which is why there were so many ripoffs coming afterwards.
I'll get to that.
Yeah. So the movie begins with 3 student filmmakers wanting to make a documentary about this character, the Blair Witch, who I didn't even realize until today, reading trivia, that there's no mythology around a Blair Witch. It's something the filmmakers completely made up. But the 3 actors didn't realize. They thought it was some real myth. And even as they're going around and interviewing some townspeople at the beginning to hear, just what's the Blair Witch story that we're going to investigate. Some of them were actors planted by the directors to build up this mythology.
And this is one of the all-time genius creations. Yeah. I think, just the simplicity of it. And like I said, their commitment to the creation.
Yeah. So. By, I think it's the 13-minute mark in the movie, the 3 students are out in the woods to make their documentary. And at that point on, it is only those 3 in the movie for the rest of the movie. Much of the movie is them just kind of lost in the woods.
Yes.
The first little bit is them hiking through, and it does a good job of starting off that sort of typical, we're on an adventure kind of together.
They've
we're
got
all
an optimism, and
then that slow descent into
almost
lost,
madness, basically.
And then little weird things happening, the finding of little piles of rocks, the little stick figures coming across the same creek multiple times.
Yes.
Because their compass isn't working, the arguments over the map, just all of it is just this slow descent into madness, like you were talking about. And then just gradually more and more ominous, creepy things happen till one of the friends disappears. And then I don't know how much I want to get into it, because obviously we're way past the statute of limitations on spoilers.
Sure.
But
once you hit 25 years.
I also, would love for anybody to watch this and go experience it. So I don't want to go all the way to the end. But here's what I'm just going to go ahead and get out right now. I really appreciated this movie on the rewatch.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
And maybe, let me back up a little bit here.
Okay.
I do have this in my notes. So my first time I watched this movie, I did not see it in theaters, like I believe you indicated you did.
I did.
My first watch was at a friend's house.
Mm-hmm.
So probably a good year after it had released.
Mm-hmm.
So all the buzz had kind of died down. I avoided it because, like I said, I'm a scaredy cat. I didn't do
Right.
horror movies. Like, it wasn't something that was going on in my way. But a friend of mine who was more into horror movies was like, you got to watch this movie. So it was three of us. We're in his house. It's in his basement. He's got woods in the backyard. It was just pitch black in his room. And it was the right atmosphere late at night. I was freaked out. And I freaked out in a good way, though. Like, where I walked out, I was like, good movie. That movie's effective.
Yeah.
Freaked me out. So a couple years later, I'm in college, and we're planning on going out into the woods for this nighttime adventure with these guys. One guy who went out into these woods all the time was like, "Hey, I found this weird, creepy house out there," and we were like, "You know what we should do? Get all these guys to watch the Blair Witch Project, and then we'll go out in the woods and find this creepy house, and it will freak everybody out."
Yeah.
Well, we get together with a bunch of guys, and we're watching it in this hangout room, and everybody's got like popcorn and drinks, and there's too many guys, and it was like
completely
different experience. And that was one of my all-time, like, oh, the environment really matters for a movie, because we watch it and all those guys were like, what is this?
This movie's stupid.
Yeah, nothing's happening. This is stupid. And I'm like, no, you guys are like, you're not getting the vibe. You're not picking up on it. So that was the last time I had watched the movie. It's been a good like 19 years.
Wow.
So first time, really effective. It worked in the environment. Second time was like wrong environment, didn't work. 19 years go by, we do this podcast. I watch it in my house. So I was like, okay, I got to do this right. I waited till nighttime, till it was dark.
Good job.
All the lights out. Like, I'm just locked in on this movie. And I was like, yes, I'm back to that first experience. This works.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, can you give me some of your history with the movie?
Yeah. I mean, my history is like, everything I did was kind of setting the table. I was there in the moment. So then the movie finally opens, and it was like, I literally remember I went to see it with my cousin. The theater was like 20 minutes from my house. We drove to the theater that morning and went ahead and bought our tickets. Because like, we want to make sure we can see this movie tonight. Because that was the kind of phenomenon it was. It was selling out. Just off that word of mouth and stuff. So we went, we got our tickets, sat down, and so unbelievably effective. I mean, I just remember, and it's like you wish you could remember those moments and remember the feeling. I remember it, but like just be there again. I just remember the very first time, like you said, they go into the woods, it kind of escalates. And one of the first times, like their tents being pushed, and you hear those little kids laughing. I'm telling you, in the theater, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I got like goosebumps on my arm because it was just like, oh, this is horrifying. And again, going back to what I'm saying, not to be repetitive, you just didn't have those experiences. There were no found footage, no mainstream found footage movies at all. There hadn't been a found footage movie in years. And yes, it's fake, but to be in that theater,
it felt very real.
It felt very real. And I was like, I am so scared for these people. And I have been watching horror movies since I was 7 years old, 6 years old, whatever. And just left that movie, and I was like, that movie was terrifying. It stuck with me. It was one of those, like, you're laying in bed at night, like you kind of got one eye open, and it just was so unsettling. And I just thought it was unbelievable.
Yeah. Have you watched it in the years since?
I have.
Yeah.
I have watched it. It had probably been, I'm going to guess it'd probably been 10 years since I watched it. And I've had similar experiences to you where I was watching it afterwards. Like, oh, guys, let's watch this movie. And the atmosphere wasn't right. The vibe wasn't right. People weren't paying attention. They were up and down. I think one time with somebody, we watched it in the daytime. And
yeah. So
I was really, really curious to see. And I'm happy to report, I think it completely holds up. You can't recapture that original experience because it was lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can judge the movie based on, well, it doesn't hold up like it did in the moment, because it was a 1 in a million kind of thing in the moment. So I think because you can't recapture that, you have to look at it now like, does it accomplish what it sets out to do? And yes, the answer is yes to me, a resounding yes. It sets out to tell you this, it's creepy, the mythology of the movie. And I watched it this time and I think like, man, this is a really well constructed, like you said, because of we're film students. And, that was a thing. Like these film, and like we've got a camera, and again, going back to 1999, or I think the movie actually is like 94.
Yeah, it's supposed to take place in 94.
It was like the idea of like, I'm a film student and I've got a camera. That was like a big deal. So they have this optimism, and the way it's structured and the way they do deteriorate into, almost madness, and their fear is so real. I think I agree with you completely. I think the performances are excellent. The thing that caught me this time was just how smart the movie was written. Not the cleverness of the dialogue, but how everything from the second that camera starts rolling, and like, what'd you say, 13 minutes they're into the woods. But from beginning to those 13 minutes, they do a great job of setting up the mythology.
Yeah.
And it comes across as like they're just talking to townspeople. But if you listen to those town people, they're telling you, oh yeah, the legend is this, and then that stuff happens later in the movie.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to the trivia, one of the things I read is that some of those interviews were done after all the filming because they felt like some of the test audiences were confused about parts, and they went back and like had some extra interviews that planted seeds. And I was like, well, it worked.
It worked.
Because I thought the same thing is like, yeah, they did do a great job of laying the groundwork for what was to come.
Not in an overly obvious way where you're like, oh, well, obviously that's going to come back and be a thing. It's not like, and then the legend is that they would blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, obviously that's going to, it's just kind of mentioned matter-of-factly. Mm-hmm. Or this, yeah, supposedly, da-da-da. And then the person interviewing kind of walks off.
Yeah.
And then but you look back on it and you're like, man, they're just laying the groundwork.
They are. And the other thing that they do that's really smart about that is it's not everything that's said comes up later. It's like 1 and 3, 1 and 4. So like there's plenty said that doesn't matter, but it's just little things that pop up that do.
So I really just had an admiration watching it again this week for how, like I said, their commitment to the mythology of this story, and just how smart they structured that movie. Like we talk about good writing on here, like we talk about your guy Sorkin a lot, and that is, flashy, really ultra clever dialogue. And this isn't. This is just simple stuff, but it's still very effective. And just the whole attitude of the filmmaker, the three students, they kind of, I wouldn't say they're arrogant, but they're kind of like, oh, we're talking to these dumb town people. And they're really, it's like, man, they're warning you and you're not listening. And that's really effective in a horror movie. Like somebody is warning you and you're just not listening. That just works. And it pays off amazingly well in this movie.
Yeah. What I think this movie does so well that makes it work, in my opinion, is the subtlety of the things that are scary.
Yes.
Because even when the movie ends, there's still like, if let's say we were taking it for real or not, like, or even in the movie's universe, there's still debate over, was something supernatural happening to them, or was it people messing with them? Mm-hmm. Was it just regular human things? Because everything is so subtle.
Yeah.
And I said, that's perfect because everyone can relate to those very simple fears of thinking you hear something in the dark, or something very small, like just something like the pile of rocks. There's nothing scary about that other than this is weird.
But when you start hyping like, it up, oh no.
Yeah. And everyone gets like how you can take something in your mind and just let it build, and like, it's exactly what happens to people who are out in the woods. When you start to feel a little scared, and then everything starts to be scarier because of it. So very realistic reactions from the people. And of course, it's one of those movies, reading about in the trivia, that they did a lot of the like, we're just putting our actors out there. They were doing the filming. The cast gave them instructions every day. They'd have like these drops with the instructions and their supplies for the day.
Yep.
And then they would do little things to mess with them. But the shaking of the tent was one where they didn't tell them beforehand that was going to happen. The actors were sleeping in the tent, and they came up and did that to freak them out for real, and did freak them out for real, and things like that. They also were giving them slightly less food every day to make them cranky and frustrated and build up all that realism. So
as you would be in real life.
Yeah. So I'm sure the actors felt like they went through a real experience with it. Yeah. I know the last scene in the house, Heather talked about, after the first time they shot it, she was like having panic attacks because they really like scared her very badly during that scene. And
that house is horrifying.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I wrote down a quote from Roger Ebert's review, 4 stars. Like I said, he wrote in his review, the noise in the dark is almost always scarier than what is making the noise in the dark.
Absolutely.
I was like, Raj, that's why you're the best, man. You just nailed it.
And then there's a real kind of, Jaws-esque thing in it because they never show the witch, which makes it scarier. But there's a moment where they intended to.
Yes.
I don't know if you read this.
I did read this.
When they're doing the famous like running out of the tent at night, and
gosh.
behind you see the shot behind Heather. She's running and screaming, and
What
she
is
screams,
that?
"What is that? What is that?" And originally there was somebody
Like with
overdressed in
pantyhose
all,
or something,
in all
right?
white,
Yeah.
as the witch. And the camera's supposed to pan over for a second and show you a glimpse in the distance, just faint enough to see.
So glad they did.
But the fact that they didn't, like I say Jaws moment, because in Jaws they originally were planning to show the shark much earlier and couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It built the tension so much better not showing.
I'm going to tell you, having seen that movie, I would guess 7 or 8 times in my lifetime, watching it again this week, that scene, I was like, I almost kind of got those chills again. I think that is such a great scene. And I think she is so good in that moment. I mean, she sounds, I guess because she was.
Yeah.
But I mean, kudos to her. Like, she's unbelievable in that scene. And when she screams that, "What is that?" with a few more choice words in there.
Yeah.
That is an unbelievable moment, I think. I think that is a great moment in that movie.
It is. Once I noted one thing that I noticed was in the famous scene of her filming herself talking to camera, like right up on camera, which also read was a mistake. It was supposed to be a little more normally framed, but she just zoomed too much and it worked out perfect. It's just those wonderful mistakes that make scenes better, that are so great to read about. But I think in the pop culture, and maybe it's just me messing this up, I think in pop culture, there's the imagining that she says the line, "I'm so scared," into the camera. But she doesn't actually say that.
No.
It's just an apology. She says, "I'm so sorry," and is apologizing to everybody for, the parents and stuff for it being her fault. She never says, "I'm so scared" in that moment. And I was like, that's so weird. I would have bet $1,000 that she looks in the camera and says, "I'm so scared."
What is that called? Like the Mandela effect?
Yeah.
Where you and
I'm sure she says that at some other point in the movie.
By the way, I think she's great in that scene.
Very good.
I love it. And again, going back to really smart dialogue, when she says, "I'm scared to close my eyes, I'm scared to open my eyes," you're like, oh my gosh, like she is so good and so convincing in that. And I hate it that scene has been mocked so much because she's got the snot or tears or whatever, but it makes it feel real. Like, of course she's going to look like she's a mess, and I was so impressed with just how well this movie held up.
Yeah. So one of the I guess categories, we'll call it, that I wrote down for these movies is I tried to imagine what would it be like if this movie released in 2024. All right. So first off, immediately this one was almost impossible to say because we've already talked about it. There's so much found footage as a genre that I'm like,
it gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, if this movie didn't come out, would that genre exist? Would something else have spurned it? Like,
I don't think so.
So it's hard to say, but just thinking about like, okay, if it's 2024 and we're saying we found a video from 1999, it's just really hard. Like we said, it's early days of internet. Mystery was still much more of a thing. It's hard to imagine. Like, obviously, I think it could still work because you could easily say cell phones wouldn't have service out in the woods, so that wouldn't help. And the video equipment's probably different. Like the quality's better no matter what because they could have been on their phones and been better quality. But I still think this movie could come out today and work and make sense. How would internet, and of course, like you said, there's internet worked to its benefit back then. Like you said, I think it was early days of the internet. They were able to launch like an internet campaign and put things like a website that these students were missing and things like that. But I was like, how would today's internet affect reception? I'd be like, it honestly probably wouldn't have been good because it would immediately, people would root out the mystery. They'd be like, no, these people aren't missing. We know where these people are. The internet would be all over that. It'd be hard to hide the actors for a year like they did. Like,
it would.
So I'm really glad this came out pre-internet for that reason. But I did conclude I think it would still work as a movie if it came out in 2024.
Oh, I think it would too. I'm like you though. I'm just so glad it came out when it did. Like everything about every decision that was put into this movie, including the fact that it came out when it came out and setting it 3 or 4 years back. It comes out in 99, but it's what they filmed in 94. They found the footage a year later, I think, is the timeline. And that all just feels right. Because it wasn't, you couldn't have said, 30 years ago because the technology wouldn't have been there. It's just the perfect encapsulation of those moments. And I I was just so glad to see that it held up.
Yeah. A little more from the trivia that we haven't talked about. One, it took 8 days to shoot. It was supposed to be a 7-day shoot, but one day the batteries on a camera died, so they had to do a lot of reshooting. There was all sorts of other. There's all sorts of little good bits in the trivia, but I tried to just pick some of the most key ones. One was that the actors actually got lost 3 different times in the woods, which I think is hilarious and probably added to
probably why the performances work.
So what happened was the directors had walkie-talkies to communicate with them, and they were giving them directions on where to go. And one of the things they did was they directed them to walk kind of in the circles that they did without telling them that's what they were doing to frustrate them. So like their reaction the first time they come back across the like log over the creek was genuine, because when they were like, this is the same log, the directors had them walking all day and ending up in the same spot. So they were genuinely frustrated. Yeah. Also, I hadn't thought about it until I read the trivia that Heather says, if I never cross a log over a creek again in my life, I'll die happy. She doesn't. No. So
she doesn't.
Did she die happy? I don't know.
No. I think she died a little scared.
Yeah. Also, there's a fan theory that Josh and Mike are the killers and that Heather was their victim.
This is a great internet movie. Yeah. If you want to just crazy, conspiracies, breakdowns. I was doing some research. It's like, no, if you look in the tree, like there's people that think they spotted the witch in the movie. And I saw another interview with the directors. They're like, absolutely not. There is nothing to be found. Like we love y'all. We appreciate you guys loving our movie, but you're digging too deep. There's nothing to be found. So it's a great internet movie. Even the IMDb for it is really interesting.
Yeah. So overall, both of us endorse this movie.
We do. I know we have to move along because we're talking about 2 movies. I want to ask you real quick, because definitely in doing the research, a criticism I found in the movie is the performances.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those just real quick. I think they're great.
I do too.
And the criticism that I found was like, I don't want to hear these 3 people just nagging each other. And there's even things like, man, the guys are really hard on Heather and all this stuff. I thought it all came across as very, natural and realistic. And, of course I just thought all that worked. There are times I think where you're like, man, I wish, all right, everyone's screaming and crying, but it all works to me. I don't think that's a fair criticism of the movie. I think the performances are great.
I agree. Along with that trivia of taking 8 days to shoot, it took 8 months to edit them. Yeah. And I thought they did a great job. Whatever they had in all their footage, they did a great job of getting it down to an hour and 21 minutes of coherent.
Yes, and making it all make sense.
And I think, it rung very real. Like each character had their times to freak out. They had their times to play the peacemaker. They had their times to they'd take turns being level-headed.
I love how that,
because it kind of is real. Like when you're with a group of people, it just sort of like roles will naturally fill.
Shift.
Yeah, because when one person's freaking out, it's kind of a natural instinct to be like, okay, now I've got to be level-headed.
And then it's like, man, the level-headed guy's now freaking out.
Yeah, and so then and people will kind of like pass the baton of like, it's my turn, it's your turn to freak out versus be level-headed.
I thought the performances were great, and that was just a criticism. And I just want to say, just lastly, if you want to move on, I'm just so glad, and you talked about it, I'm just so glad they stuck to their guns and never showed us anything. Because I did read about some ideas for alternate endings and stuff, and that final shot is just unreal.
Yeah.
And we said last week, movies are just a sum of choices and decisions. This just feels like a movie where every choice for this movie was the right choice. Yeah. And the choices they chose not to make were the right choices also. And just kudos to them. I just think they made a movie that'll always be creepy.
Yeah. And just before we move on, this will be the last thing I'll bring up is there was ill-fated sequels, and I think maybe a reboot, in 2016-ish or something. Did you watch any of those?
I did.
I watched the sequel, The Book of Shadows, which is just terrible.
It's an abomination.
Nothing to do with the original. It doesn't even make sense. Not the same style. It's just a regular.
It's a movie.
It's like you said, those generic Friday the 13th,
That's all
Halloween, late sequels. It had that feeling to it.
So that is my one criticism, is that this movie, and I don't know who the blame falls on. If it is the directors, I guess they would have given their permission, but there's comic books, there's a video games, they're guys, you created something so unique and original. like we talk about a lot on this podcast. I wish it was just that was the standalone thing.
Yeah.
There's books. They try to create this whole Blair Witch universe, and big thumbs down for me on all those.
Oh, no, I lied, as I always do, because I just remembered I said I was going to say something about the budget at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Your numbers were the same numbers I heard, but the original budget just to film
It was like
was
$20,000.
$60,000, and then the price once the studio like started the marketing budget and everything like that was whatever you got to, like the maybe close to $1 million or something,
Right.
but then it grossed $248 million. So it was actually, I think it still is in the Guinness Book of World Records for the greatest return on investment in movie history. As far as like, I think it said, I read, for every dollar they spent, they made 10,000.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
I mean, and that's impressive. I mean, literally one of the most profitable movies of all time. Unbelievable.
Yeah. This is probably the point where we should put in some sort of little intermission for people listening or watching. Go get your snacks and use
Take
the
a bathroom
restroom
break.
But for us, we're gonna power through.
No breaks for us, Jeremy.
No, we're committed. We're in. So the second movie we're going to talk about was my pick.
Mm-hmm.
The movie is Fight Club. Now, this movie was released on October 15th, 1999. Again, you would maybe think those two release dates for these two movies would be swapped, but whatever. Yeah. This is a little different. This is a movie with a $63 million budget, directed by an up-and-coming director, maybe even just arrived at this point, I should say.
Yeah.
David Fincher, who this was his fourth movie, the third one he'll claim.
Yes.
He had Alien 3 in 92.
Which he despises.
Yes. 7 in 95. 97, The Game, and then 99 was Fight Club. Mm-hmm. He would have Panic Room in 02 and Zodiac in 07. He's not a guy who works, like, he's not cranking them out like Ridley Scott. Every few years.
Yeah. Probably because he has to do a gazillion takes for every shot.
That's absolutely probably true. I'll go ahead and talk some of the box office with this one. Not a huge success.
Yeah, underperformed.
Yeah, it 37 million in the U.S. and Canada, just over 100 million worldwide, which is roughly about 185 million today, which is less than Wonka made domestically. So if that tells you anything. It was number 39 at the box office in the year 99.
Yeah.
38 movies outperformed Fight Club.
Yeah.
You couldn't name 38 movies with more cultural impact than Fight Club, but it just did not.
Just didn't connect with audiences in the theater.
I wanted to find somewhere where there was a figure on DVD sales and poster sales because I figured that probably would really bump the number because I would say conservatively 10% of boy dorm rooms in college had the Brad Pitt Fight Club poster up in it.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure that number through DVD sales and posters ballooned a little bit.
I did read where it really hit on DVD.
Yeah, for sure. It stars Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Helena Bonham Carter, Meatloaf, and Jared Leto. That kind of kills me that Meatloaf and Jared Leto are the fourth and fifth biggest names in the movie because it feels like such a big movie and there are a lot of little parts in it. But then you realize, like, I don't know who's a bigger character in the movie than Meatloaf and Jared Leto once you get past the main three. Like, it's kind of a small cast.
Yeah. It's just so funny to me that Meatloaf's in that movie.
It is. And playing the character that he does.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Tomato score, it had a critic score of 79%, so lower than Blair Witch. That again surprised me. Audience score of 96%.
I was going to say kind of the opposite of Blair Witch in some ways.
Which still, that surprises me. I'm guessing, I don't even know how Rotten Tomatoes works. I think people can continue contributing to that, so I think it has to have gone up over the years.
It's kind of a busted system.
Because I remember when it came out, the flop aspect of it wasn't surprising because whereas Blair Witch had one of the best marketing campaigns of all time, Fight Club didn't. I think the studio didn't believe in the movie, and they mismarketed it as just kind of an action movie. Like, you would have guessed it was a Jean-Claude Van Damme street fighting movie because of the way that they marketed it.
So if you read the Wikipedia page, it says that. Like, the studio did not like this movie.
Yeah.
And they were just like, whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I knew people who I heard before I saw the movie who said, it's not a good movie. Like, there's not much about fighting in it. Like again, that's what people thought. They were going to see a movie where people are just going to be like
a
squared
new
up.
version of Kickboxer or something. Yeah,
And it is not that.
It's not. And I remember the soap was a big part of the marketing of the movie. Like I remember the first teaser poster was like Fight Club carved in soap.
Yeah,
and but it's confusing.
Yeah, once you see it, you're like, that's hilarious.
It is, but when all you're seeing again without internet to tell you everything, you're just going like, okay, like what is this?
Yeah. So my history with it, I heard it was bad. That was my first thing I heard from it. Again, I was a 9th grade student when this came out, and I remember hearing a senior student that I knew was like, "Oh, I saw it was terrible." But then I saw it probably a while after it came out. Didn't see it in theaters. I'm sure I was around 16 years old when it came out, and I loved it.
Okay.
I loved how different and weird and terrible it was.
Yeah.
It became way too important to me.
Okay.
So full disclosure on this movie, it's not just a movie I loved. Like, it was probably for several years what I would call my favorite movie. And it stayed a favorite for a long time. I thought it's the movie that made Brad Pitt my favorite actor. Thought he was the coolest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
Loved Edward Norton too. And it's it's a philosophical movie. Like, it's a dark comedy. That's the way that the filmmakers and the actors describe it. It's very comedic, but it's also like very philosophical and the things that they talk about and say. And it's like perfect for an angsty teenager who's struggles in life with no purpose. And it's a movie about like, how do people with no purpose cope and feel and deal with life? And it's very primitive and savage, and like, I'm not surprised that 16-year-old me loved it, but I also looked back and I said, why was 16-year-old me even watching this movie? It is a rough movie.
It is.
Yeah. What's your history with it?
So my history with it is Fincher had so much credibility built up with me from Seven. So like Seven was the kind of movie, I was 15 when Seven came out, and I love horror. I think the serial killer genre is kind of fast. And Seven was just this phenomenon. And so Fincher, I was all in on Fincher literally just because of Seven. But then it's like, I saw The Game and I was like, well, okay. But that carryover from Seven, that still gave the hype. So I went to this movie. I saw it in the theater. I agree with you completely. How about the marketing of it? Nothing about the marketing or promotion of this movie got me excited. I was just excited because it was a new David Fincher movie. And I went to see it, and I just want to say this before anything else I say the rest of this discussion. I like this movie. Okay? I like this movie, but where you're talking about, like 16-year-old me, and I was this angsty teenager and all this stuff. See, I was just a little bit past that. I was 19. I was all the things, but I just so those themes are like the angry Generation X, or what it was, it Generation X. Did I write that down? Yeah, Generation X and all that angst and stuff that just didn't connect with me. So again, I liked the movie, but it didn't hit me hard. It was just like, I more left where I was like, Brad Pitt's awesome in that movie. Like, Brad Pitt's great, and he's so charismatic. And of course, you had to talk about the twist and that kind of stuff. But I never thought at the time, and I still thought it rewatching it, where it just doesn't connect with me. I see the themes. I understand the themes. I understand I don't know how to get out my aggression, and I'm just unhappy, and my life isn't going the way it's going that I wanted it to go. So the fight, and at least I'm feeling something, even if it's pain. I get all of that, but the movie just doesn't make that connection with me. So I like the movie and I appreciate the movie. It's just not an upper tier movie for me.
Yeah. I definitely think you're healthier for all that being true. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what the movie is. So the movie is this very stylized. That's one thing that jumps out right away about it. Because when I think of Fincher, he's a very stylistic director, but not always in the way that this one is. This one, first off, a lot of cool like CGI shots. It's cool that he was pushing. You could tell he was doing some of his like James Cameron, like, what can I do in this movie?
Absolutely.
And it also fit the tone of the movie because it is sort of a surrealist movie.
Yeah.
So It is very stylized.
Mhm.
There's a whole lot of things going on, from the like little flashes of Tyler Durden that you see.
Yeah.
That all of it's kind of contributing to the idea that what you're seeing is not necessarily real.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that all makes sense
and it
once you know the
yes,
reveal.
it does. And so it's about the character, the narrator, who doesn't get a name.
I do
for
love
most
that.
of the
I
movie.
love
Yeah,
he doesn't get a name.
I love that, and especially because the first time I watched it, I didn't even catch on that he
doesn't
wasn't
have a
having a name. I will say, I had the twist spoiled for me before I watched it.
Okay.
But once I got in the movie, I kind of forgot about the twist for most of it. Every once in a while, I'd be like, wait, didn't I hear that? Oh, shoot. And then, anyways, so he can't sleep. He's struggling in life. Like, he just sort of like is an insomniac. There's some great little lines. Like, when you're an insomniac, you're never really sleeping. You're never really awake.
Yep.
Everything's just a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yep.
So he starts going to these support groups for people with diseases and stuff, because everybody's sad and mourning there. And somehow he finds catharsis in these other people mourning and mourning with them. And it helps him start sleeping and all of this. And then Marla Singer, he claims is the start of all of it. Marla starts showing up to these different meetings. She's like him, just faking, just showing up to be part of the meetings. One of my favorite lines is Marla Singer, "The scratch of the roof of your mouth that would heal if only you'd stop tonguing it, but you can't." And I'm like, that's brilliant. It's a brilliant line right there. And so things happen. He meets Brad Pitt's character, Tyler Durden, on an airplane. He goes home and his apartment has been blown up.
Yes.
And he calls Tyler Durden, his character, and ends up staying with him. And the first night they're together, Tyler Durden makes him fight him.
Yes.
Just for fun.
I want you to hit me.
Yeah, just says he doesn't, he's never been in a fight. Edward Norton says that's a good thing. He's like, no, it's not. How much could you know about yourself? You've never been in a fight. Teenager logic, you're like, so true. I've never been in a fight.
I hear that, man.
Yeah, if I was, what would I be?
Got to find out what I'm made of.
Yeah. The whole movie reminds me of this great tweet I saw one time that said, "Every no fear shirt I wore in middle school is a lie." It's like, yes, I had no fear shirts. Yeah. Yes, I was scared of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of come alive in fighting, like you said. I feel something, and what happens is they find all the stuff they were living for before. Edward Norton's character, which was consumerism. He was just trying to like fill his apartment with these things.
There's that great shot where it kind of like shows all the like products.
Yeah, it just pans through his apartment and everything's popping up with their description and price.
Yes, that's really, really well done.
And his idea is that he was like, after his apartment's blown up, he's like, I was really close to being complete. I almost had all the things I needed in his mind. And Tyler Durden's philosophy is, you should just let that all go. None of it means anything. Yeah. Why are you slaving away at this job you don't like to buy all this stuff? Do you really need it? Has any of it made you happy? And so his ultimate thing is like, just let go. Just don't care about anything. He is the definition of like a nihilist or anarchist. And I don't know why anarchists are always the fun characters in movies.
They are.
Tyler Durden, the Joker, whatever. These people who just don't care at all. There's something about them that people just
you're
like
getting to live through them.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
I could never do this. Yeah. But man, it's a blast watching somebody do it.
And the Joker's definitely on the extreme because he's like murderous and crazy. Yeah. Tyler Durden was created like, what if we take things that people love? I mean, obviously it came before that Joker, but what if we take that sort of thing that people love, the chaos, and we bring it just
to the edge.
Outside of acceptable? Yeah. Because he's not going to be a murderer. He's just, he's definitely a vandal, and he's crass, and he's crude, and he's violent. But he has rules in his fights. Like he's like, I was really going through it and I was like, man, Tyler Durden's like, he's not a good guy, but he's not a traditional bad guy.
No, he's not.
He's just very committed to his crazy philosophies. He's kind of a cult leader, but not a murderer.
Right.
And all this stuff. And then I don't even know where I was going with that. Yeah, so Tyler Durden's whole influence and philosophy really takes over the narrator's life, and the Fight Club grows and stuff. Then it gets to the third act where they move on from Fight Club to Project Mayhem, and it comes about all these like big things that they're doing, and it does become more like the cult of Tyler Durden. And then the big twist happens. And this one, we'll go ahead and spoil it because you can't talk about this movie without talking about the twist. Tyler Durden
is no Tyler Durden.
The narrator. It is a projected, it is a character that he made up of everything that he wishes he was and wasn't. But he lives as that character. Yeah. So, something we've seen in other stories before where somebody is split personalities and they create a character to like to enact all the things they wish they could. And frankly, like you see it, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like if 16-year-old me were to make up the person he wishes he was, he'd make up Tyler Durden.
Yeah, he's everything that you make up someone because like I want them to be everything that I'm not.
Yeah.
So that all again, I don't mean to sound negative about the movie. I like the movie. I think it's really well done. I think Pitt's amazing, and I like too that they don't save that twist. It's like the twist, roll credits.
Yeah.
I like that part of the structure.
Yeah, much more has to play out. But on the rewatch, my thought was the last act isn't great.
Yeah,
That's how I felt. Like there's still good things in it. There's still a lot of good dark humor in it. But it just like as I was watching,
it kind
I
of
just
loses
stopped.
its momentum.
It lost
maybe?
momentum. I stopped caring. It gets a little too out of control and crazy. Like there's an element of it that when it's a little smaller, it's not realistic, but at least it like I don't know.
You're telling this story in
Yeah.
these confines, and
it-
then it feels like it's just
it goes off the rails.
it almost in a way it feels like two movies kind of mashed together
Yeah, it kind of
with
does.
that last act. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It definitely kind of. Again, I don't want to overdo it because it is a dark comedy. It's like that's its purpose.
Yeah.
And when I say it's philosophical, like it has things to say, but it's not even really trying to say those things. It's almost like satirizing the people who would say those things.
That's really well said. Yeah.
But by the third act, it pretty much drops that. So it's not
does.
even about that anymore. Now it's just about things happening.
Yeah.
It just becomes a movie. It no longer like we're taking a look at a certain type of psychology and that sort of thing. The other thing I wrote is, man, it is too dark.
Yeah.
It's too angsty.
It
like
is.
I think when I was a 16-year-old, like I kind of enjoyed that. It had some of those elements of like I'm watching something I'm not supposed to watch. Oh, this is really gritty and gross. Oh, they're going places they shouldn't go,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And as an adult, I'm watching and just kind of like ick. It's kind of yucky.
Yep.
I
And
don't
it's-
like it as much.
It's so funny because I agree with you completely. And it's like, yeah, it's too dark, it's too ugly. But then, like, why does that not work? But like Blair Witch, and Blair Witch is not like cheerful and happy.
right.
It's like it's hard sometimes to figure out why something works for one movie but doesn't work for another movie.
Yeah.
It's not always an exact science.
Yeah. I mean, and even Fincher's other work, like Seven, is what
The
we talked about, one of the
darkest
darkest
movie
movies ever. And so why is I watched that? But I think because it's really dark, but it's got characters in it who are really hopeful. You got this like
The Morgan Freeman
the
character is so essential to
world-wise-
Seven. Yeah.
yeah, like who is still shocked by all the things, but also like kind of like this is the world we live in and it's crazy. The Brad Pitt character who's optimistic and like can't accept that we live in this kind of world
Yeah.
and is
Like,
why it
I can
eventually drives
be a
him to
good enough cop to
Yeah.
overcome all this.
exactly. And in Fight Club, there's none of that. You're just following characters who are terrible characters.
So one of my notes I wrote down is let me find it real quick. Oh, I said it. It's always a risk in movies to make an entire movie of unlikable characters.
Yeah,
It's a risk, and more times than not, it probably doesn't. I mean, I don't want to say you can't make a movie with. I mean, Tarantino does it a lot. He doesn't have a lot of redeemable characters, but even his evil characters tend to have some kind of sense of humor or something. And yeah, this is a tough hang.
which again, and these do. And so I want to be very clear. I still like this movie. I still think it's a good
Same.
movie. It's just, boy, has it slid down my all-time favorite list. Before, like, again, when it came out, for a while, it was like, this is my favorite movie. For a long time, I would have said, like, top 10 or so. And now, like, I could probably name 50 movies, and I wouldn't put this on the list. So it's not that I dislike this movie, but just watching it, I'm going, it's just a different experience watching it now. It's almost 40 as when I was an angsty teenager.
Yeah. And I don't mean to sound like a square or anything too, but just the fighting, it's just a little off-putting after a while to me. Where you're like, golly, like this is just nasty. And again, like so many times when I talk about movies, I almost feel like a hypocrite because a lot of my favorite movies are ultra violent. I mean, one of my favorite movies, I love Casino and Goodfellas, and those movies are brutal and nasty and violent. But for some reason, it doesn't bother me in those.
I think it's a little bit of the tonal jumps in this movie because, I've said it so many times now that it's a dark comedy, and there are stretches of the movie where it's like kind of silly and funny, and like there's the great moments of their assignment to start a fight and
Yeah.
lose, and the hard time they have just even getting people to fight them
Yes.
on the streets, and then it jumps to these moments of hyper real,
Just brutality.
visceral violence, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, like that
Maybe
was
that's
that was
it.
a shift. Like so, it's kind of a roller coaster of feelings, and I
Mhm.
think that's what makes it so difficult uh, is how it goes back and forth on these things. You got Edward Norton fighting himself, and it's hilarious, and then Edward Norton fighting Jared Leto, and it's
And
like,
you're like, good grief.
yeah, gruesome.
Gruesome.
So I think that's what makes it such a challenge in this movie as opposed to other movies that are violent, but you kind of know that's the ride you're on the whole time.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking when you said that, Jared Leto does not fare well in David Fincher movies because then he's in Panic Room and
Yeah.
doesn't end well for him in that movie.
No.
I'll just say that.
Also, not like it took me several years to realize that was Jared Leto because with the really blonde hair,
Yeah.
and he doesn't do very much in the movie.
No.
Like it's funny again saying he's the 5th listed actor in the movie, and he's got like 3 lines
I
in it,
know.
maybe. And I don't even think he has a name in the movie. I think he's just blonde guy.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like we were both in agreement, like a flawed, they would call like on the rewatchables, they say a flawed rewatchable.
Yeah.
I mean, a movie I still enjoy. I'm glad it exists. And, if I want to see anyone take the swing of trying to put these themes up on film, I'm glad it was Fincher.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably the guy for the job, and I'm glad it's part of his resume. And again, I want to to be positive. Pitt's unbelievable.
Pitt is unbelievable. Like he is so cool all the time.
I wondered too, though, and not that it's his fault, but like he is so good, and he's having so much fun, and like you said, the anarchist, and it's like this guy's so cool. And then once you do hit that reveal, if that just kind of lets some of the some of the air out of the balloon, maybe
it does. And
it's like it's hard to fault Pitt for being so good in this movie that once you do get to that reveal, it does suck some of the wind out of it. But I wonder if that contributes.
I do think, again, 60-year-old me, teenager me, even 20-year-old me, to be honest, watching that is like, Brad Pitt is so cool, and Tyler Durden's such a cool character. But not that I thought he was a realistic person, but kind of in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as an adult, I'm watching going like, of course this is a figment of this guy's imagination because this character's so like nobody's this like cool all the time and like effortlessly and wearing the crazy clothes he wears
and pulling it
the
off.
Things he said, and I'm like, yeah, nobody pulls this off. Of course, this is in a person's head because it's an even actual real life Brad Pitt isn't as cool as Tyler Durden. The other thing that I'll say though is, and I came to this conclusion a long time ago, but a good several years after first watching the movie is, I remember, probably 10 years after the movie was out and I loved it, rewatching it and going, Edward Norton doesn't get enough love for how good he is in this movie because Pitt has the flashy role.
Yeah.
I think this is actually Norton's best performance. And I think he's a good actor. But like if I had to show somebody a movie and be like, Norton's good, I'd show him Fight Club because I think he's awesome in this movie.
One thing I did notice more that I just maybe hadn't thought about in a long time that I thought was really smart and really cool is like how in the movie Norton just looks worse and worse as the movie goes on. And like he's so committed, like he actually was like losing weight and like purposefully not sleeping and doing all these things. And that's effective.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like I'm sitting there going, man, this movie doesn't hold up. It's like there's a lot of good things about this movie. I think ultimately to me, like I said, when we first started talking about it, is just the angst and the me versus the system and, all that stuff. It just doesn't hit home with me.
Yeah. So this one I thought was a much more interesting thought exercise to say, what if this movie was released in 2024?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I wrote is, well, it'd be way more controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Because the way violence is perceived in our culture these days.
People have their...
kind of like... It's not directly connected to like bullying, but like, I mean, violence towards people is such a more hot button issue these days. They would ban kids from being allowed to watch this because if anybody, like when this movie came out, people started doing actual fight clubs.
I know.
Which is terrible.
It is.
I'm not gonna lie and say that me and my friends wouldn't be like, we should start a fight club because we were that dumb. We would say that stuff.
Sure.
But if that happened now, like, it would be a huge deal.
It'd be a huge thing. You get yanked out of theaters real quick, and
Exactly. So I think it, like I said, immediately be way more controversial, which could help or hurt its box office. We know that. Like, sometimes being controversial actually could help your box office.
you know what though? I think if it came out today, unfortunately, I think it would go straight to Netflix.
You know, you're probably right. I did say I think it would have interesting things to say about modern culture
I did too.
because the things that it criticizes about, like, the modern man, boy, is there not even more to say
I
about
was
the
gonna say, there's
modern
a lot
state
more to
of
say now.
masculinity and
Oh,
being
yeah.
a man. Like, and it'd probably contribute to the controversy of it because I don't know what Tyler Durden would have to say about transgenderism
He'd have
and
some
all
hot
that.
takes, I'm sure.
He'd have some
He'd
hot
have
takes
some
for
remarks.
sure. Yeah. How would the differences in technology now versus 99 affect the storytelling? My thought was it actually would probably play better because this whole idea of kind of be off the grid,
Mhm.
I think would be even more impactful now because I think it's more appealing to people than ever. People
That's
are like, if I could just give up all that extra stuff
Mhm.
and live in a crappy old abandoned house with only the things I need, let's do it.
I think it might resonate more with people now.
Yeah. And then my last thing was, how would the internet affect its reception? First off, any movie with a twist, I always fear for because the internet is so great
It's
at
gonna spoil it
spoiling.
so fast.
Like I said, more criticisms of the content. But my thought was, this movie would probably do great in the let's take 30-second clips and put them on TikTok
Yep.
era. Like,
I think
it's
so
a
too.
movie that I think would do very well in that setting. Like,
Mhm.
there'd probably be great viral marketing campaigns with Tyler Durden doing little social media things,
yeah.
and things like that. So, like I said, it's the equivalent to like every 10% of every boy's dorm rooms having the Fight Club poster would be like all these like Tyler Durden spoof spin-offs on TikTok and people doing Tyler Durden type things and
Mhm.
Project Mayhem things.
Oh,
and
yeah.
things like that.
I'm kind of surprised that the Tyler Durden character doesn't have. Maybe it does, and I just don't see it. Surprised it doesn't still have some legs.
Yeah.
Memes and stuff like that. And like I said, it could, and I just don't realize it. But I don't know. That whole movie, in some ways, I don't know. It kind of, in some ways, feels forgotten a little bit.
It does. It feels like a real time capsule of
It does.
1999.
Mhm.
I don't know. That's what I say. I don't know if new generations are finding the movie.
I don't
and
know.
probably in large part because, like I said,
It's not
it's-
easy to find.
it's maybe not easy to find, but also just does not fit the sensibilities of today. I don't think even teenagers, are the angsty teenagers
Mm-mm.
of like they were back then. They have their own unique problems,
Right.
but they're not the same ones this movie is tackling.
I agree.
So I don't know that people would connect to it
Yeah.
quite the same.
It's surprising to me too that this movie just didn't land like box office wise.
Yeah.
It just didn't. You talked about it, but I don't want to be repetitive, but it just didn't land.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, this is not even really related to Fight Club, except for the end of it is, I'm going to forget the guy's name now, but the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia who co-owns Wrexham with Ryan Reynolds, and he got really like jacked and in shape on the show. He went from kind of a flubby guy like me to in shape, and he's had some great quotes about like, I don't know why everybody doesn't do this. All you need to do is hire a personal chef, a trainer, train you all these hours a day, do all this, blah blah blah. He's like, why didn't everybody do it? Because the joke is that not everybody, like hardly anybody, can do all those things. But he told this great story I heard where he went to a personal trainer and he said, hey, I decided I really want to commit. I want to get in great shape because I've got this body type in mind that I want to get to. And the trainer said, don't even tell me. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, don't tell me. He goes, for the past 25 years, every time a guy says I have a body type in mind, it's the same one. He goes, no, like I just, he goes, don't tell me. He goes, I know. And he goes, what? He goes, Brad Pitt Fight Club. He goes, it's Brad Pitt Fight Club. That's it. He goes, every guy goes to me and says, I want the Brad Pitt Fight Club body. And I'm like, yeah, like, so when I say 10% of every guy's dorm room had the Brad Pitt poster of him shirtless, and then like, it's because every guy was like, that was the joke, is that's the ideal man. And of course, in the movie, it comes right after a scene where they're on a bus and Edward Norton points out a Calvin Klein underwear ad.
Yep.
He's like, "Oh, is that what a man's supposed to look like?" And the sort of joke is the next scene. There's Brad Pitt, shirtless, standing up, really cool, muscular, ripped, looking straight out of a Calvin Klein underwear ad, and it's like juxtaposing, like,
Right.
even though they're making fun of, is that what a man's supposed to look like? His projection, Tyler
Is
Durden,
that.
is that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like they say, like, if you, and I notice is like you watch the movie, the worse Norton looks, the better Pitt looks in the movie. And that's a nice contrast and stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any world or any time this movie could have been released where Pitt would have gotten a Best Supporting Actor nomination for that movie.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It makes me want to look up and see who
think
were
that
the
year it was,
nominees
like,
that
I
year.
think Michael Caine for like the Cider House Rules, maybe have been Best Supporting Actor that year.
I think you might be right because it was. I'm pretty sure it was the Cider House Rules came out that year, and I think he did.
I think
win.
I'm right about that.
Boy, that's one that you look back on and go like, yeah, hey, I think pop culture in hindsight would be
Tell a
more than
different
happy
story,
to give that to Brad Pitt.
As Bill Simmons would say, Cider House Rules has no cultural currency right now at all.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's I remember it was just like that movie. It wasn't even talked about like, oh, this is gonna get some Oscar love or anything. It really came and went as far as like critics and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it had the cultural impact. And that's another thing I wrote down too. I think in some ways this hurt the movie. I don't know if you remember this kind of narrative around this movie where people were like, this movie is about life. And it's like, it got blown up where it's like, no, this movie, it's telling you about, like, people almost put it on too high of a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I do think that hurt the movie in a way.
Well, people did kind of buy into the cult of Tyler Durden. Like,
they did.
Yeah.
I guess that's exactly what I'm trying to say. And it was like,
it wasn't the filmmaker's intention. Like I said, they were like, we're just making a dark comedy, man. We're making fun of these things.
Yeah. And people took it. And I just remember, in the movie nerd circles, people like, no, man, like, you don't get it. Fight Club is life-changing. And I always just felt like I was on the outside going like, is it? Like, it was just, it was good, but.
But, I'll go back to something and say, like, again, what young me thought, and I don't think young me's wrong about this. I used to say, I think Tyler Durden, to me, was the natural conclusion that I would arrive to if I wasn't a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I didn't have God to believe in, his basic look was like, hey, everything in life is meaningless. It's the same thing that the writer of Ecclesiastes arrived to. Mm-hmm. But then eventually the writers of Ecclesiastes arrived at like, but God gives us purpose. Yeah. And Tyler Durden doesn't believe in God.
So just go do what you want.
Believes God most likely doesn't like you. In fact, he probably hates you, as he says. So where does that leave you? It leaves you at the total depravity. And so, like, that's the thing I think makes this movie difficult is it is a dark comedy, but it is kind of satirizing some of the things that's saying, but it also is saying some things that make a lot of sense. And Definitely. I think that's why it becomes a bit of a muddled mess because it's too many things at once. It's kind of fun and lighthearted in moments. It's, like we said, brutal and violent in moments. It's making fun, but it's also like telling a lot of truth, and it's a lot of things. And it's just sort of a weird stew.
It is. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Going back to your food analogy, there's just a lot of stuff in there, and yeah, kind of like it's like, man, it's a dark comedy, but probably too much dark, and it's it just a lot of big ideas, and I appreciate that. I do. I've always said like the worst thing a movie can be is just dull and boring. Yeah, and then this does not qualify as dull and boring. Yeah, and like I said at the top, I like the movie. It just never ascends to that next level, and it just doesn't. I don't want to say it doesn't hold up. That's not the right way to say it, but it just doesn't have those long legs to me, like something like a Jaws or something that I know for a fact I am always going to like. Yeah, my whole life I'm going to love Jaws and think it's a masterpiece, and this just doesn't have that. Yeah,
I would be really fascinated to hear what David Fincher thinks about it all these years later. Just, I don't think he's going to say anything bad about it, but it's like I said, it feels very unique among his works. A little more like high energy, again, CGI, like that sort of thing that I think as his career comes on, he got a little more of this like deliberate pace. And this one's very like, it moves briskly. It does. It's a long movie, but it moves.
It does move
rapidly. And I don't know. I just wonder what Fincher would say about it himself. Like if he would go like, look back fondly on that movie, or if he looks back and goes like, yeah, like looking back, like it's kind of different.
I had a lot of ideas there.
And I don't know. I'd be curious.
I do think it's interesting that his next movie after this was Panic Room. Yeah. Which doesn't have a lot of big ideas.
Yeah.
It's more of a traditional, like,
Went real small.
he went small, and he's not trying to say everything like he is with this movie. I don't think he's really trying to comment on society or anything. It's just like, I just want to tell a story, and I wonder if that was intentional for him to go, okay, because even the game, there's a lot going on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's trying to say quite as much as Fight Club is, but there's just a lot going on, and just kind of interesting to look. I always like to look at a director's career and see how one movie follows the next movie.
Yeah. Well, and you have the game, which is supposed to be kind of real, but it's obviously very surreal, and like how someone could elaborately pull off this elaborate of a hoax, basically. Fight Club, which is obviously very surreal because it's half of it's imagined and eccentric and all that. Panic Room, like you said, is small, and then gets to Zodiac. Which is very grounded in reality, very like
to an extreme.
Yeah, like it's just, the reality is, people look at it and be like, well, it's a serial killer movie by Fincher, but it's actually just a people movie.
Yeah,
it's like a procedural.
I almost think of it as more of it's like a newsroom movie.
Yeah,
it's like a process movie.
Yeah.
Like, detective work isn't chasing people down the alley shooting at them. Detective work is the grind and paperwork and dead ends,
and it's about obsession.
Yeah.
So, I not to say that any of that's response to the previous things he did.
No,
like he didn't do Fight Club,
but it's just interesting.
But
to
it
look
is
at.
interesting, yeah, for sure. So I think, again, we talk about all the time. Maybe we need some different people on here to disagree with us because we're in agreement so often.
We are.
But Fight Club, still a good movie, but
Yes.
doesn't quite have the legs. And again, a large part of that, I think, is getting older, getting wiser, feeling differently about things like this that have such strong things to say. But like we said, the interesting thing to me is that it's not staying alive in the young culture the same way, because you go like, well, yeah, I'm getting too old for it, but are young people still like? But because young people are so different now, it's just I try to imagine, like, what would Tyler Durden look like for the 2024 19-year-old? Would he be doing TikTok dances?
He probably would.
I don't know.
Yeah, he'd be playing Fortnite, or I don't know.
I don't know what the idealized masculine individual is for the 2024-year-old.
Right.
Or
I'll say this about
19-year-old.
kind of the staying power of Fight Club. Like, just because I talk movies all the time, I show my kids a lot of movies. I feel like for their ages, they're pretty well rounded for movies. I don't even know if they know what this movie is.
Yeah.
And they know a lot about movies. So I'll have to ask them and see if they know anything about Fight Club.
Yeah. If they say they haven't seen it, you're going to let them watch it?
I would let them watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're old enough.
Yeah. I have to wonder those things myself. Like, if I had a kid, 16-year-old, would I let him watch Fight Club? Thank you, Dad, for being cool and letting me watch a bunch of movies. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there. But I did watch it and go like, probably shouldn't have.
Right.
And I think at the end of the time, my dad was like, that's pretty dark, Jeremy.
It is.
You sure you really like that movie? Because that's really dark. Yeah, Dad, I love this movie. And of course, when you're younger, you also, I just don't think, have a feel for how, like, dark things don't feel as dark. They feel fake. You know what I mean? So you don't think of them as dark, and then you get older and you realize, like, no, like, things are really that dark in the world and in the movie.
It's not as fun.
Yeah, it doesn't feel fun and fake anymore.
Well, and when you're 16, 15, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever, like, you're looking for ways to, like, I think we were both the same in the sense of, like, we weren't out doing a lot of heinous, terrible things. So it's like, it feels like your version of rebellion. Like, oh yeah, I'm watching this movie.
Yeah.
And and then, now when I'm 43, I can watch whatever I want. You don't have that kind of, like, I don't know if it's a thrill necessarily, but you don't sit there and get that satisfaction of, like, I'm watching like, I'm sticking it to the system. Even if the system's just my parents, like, by watching this movie. Yeah. So you don't have that anymore either. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Really fun to look back at both movies, though.
Absolutely. And it makes me excited to continue doing this.
Me too.
I don't have my pick yet, so I won't even ask you for yours.
I don't have mine either. I've got a lot of things written down.
We'll take a few weeks of doing some other things, and get back to this gimmick. But hope you guys have enjoyed this with us. And I'll go ahead and say this: I haven't completely hone my list. So if you guys have recommendations from 1999, you're like,
I'll give anything a
yeah,
shot.
you guys should definitely look back at this movie. Let us know, and we'll add it to our considered list of what we're going to look back on. But thank you guys for joining us for what was another pretty lengthy podcast. But I think, man, we just had way too much fun going over these old movies.
Be careful if you go out into the woods.
Yeah,
That's the moral of the story.
definitely. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.